Fahamu and I both sat on the panel to select artists for Elevate.
Fahamu Pecou, first of all, he makes you work harder at what you do. He's able to crank out almost like a good DJ in the moment. You're looking at the crowd and you're able to address what's happening, right? He can do that with his art.
You know, he uses himself and his artwork.
And if there's something going on in the world or in the community, he's gonna put that in his artwork. The dude he's really a genius, but it flows out of him.
We had this set of encyclopedias in my house from like 1969, which were the only books that we had in the house. This is exactly the same book, 1969. And I got to see, and I looked up cartoonists. And I'm gonna read you the passage. The cartoonist who can produce a cartoon series or comic strip for a syndicate does better. His earnings could be as much as $1,000 a week. So in my 9-year-old mind, I began to do the calculations. I said, if he was making $1,000 a week in 1969, he has to be making a lot more now. My style is inspired by my background in creating for hip hop culture. I started out working as a graphic designer in a boutique agency in New York, where I got to like sit next to, you know, hip hop artists like Sean Combs and, you know, Busta Rhymes and, you know, all these guys in the late 90s and design collateral for them. And it was a really great experience because I got to meet the person rather than the persona. Fast forward to the time I moved back to Atlanta and I started my own agency here. You know, I have very similar clientele working with hip hop artists in restaurants, clubs, politicians, you name it. I was doing it all. Thinking back at that time, you know, what would happen if somebody marketed a visual artist the same way we do a rapper? You know, would it have the same impact? At one point, I was designing collateral for Shirley Franklin, who was the first female mayor of the city of Atlanta. And we would always have to end every collateral piece that we created for her with this line that said, paid for by the committee to make Shirley Franklin mayor of Atlanta. And I used to think, who's this committee? Like, what is that about, you know? And so as a gag, you know, I created a committee to promote me.
Well, you know, when I was introduced to Fahamu's art, we all learned that Fahamu was the shit.
He's the shit. That's the best way to put it.
I came up with this whole tagline. It's called Fahamu Pecou is the shit. And it's paid for by the committee to make Fahamu Pecou officially the shit. And so it was really kind of a joke, but at the same time, it was an attempt to get my own artwork out there, you know, because all the while that I was doing graphic design, I really just wanted to be a painter.
And that was what he plastered around everywhere.
And I went all around the city and I would wheat paste these posters and stickers all over the place, you know? And I just wanted to see what would happen.
And so if somebody says that about themselves, you want to know more about him and why does he think he's the shit and the rest of us are chopped liver.
Immediately people would like, are you the guy on the poster? Like, what do you do? Are you a rapper? You know, and I never would say, you know, what it was that I did. It was just about getting my name out there.
I love how he's been able to take himself and throws himself into pop culture and turns himself into an icon, but he's still able to laugh at himself.
It was shocking, but it was effective.
An average day for me is anything but average. But for the most part, I try to keep a regular schedule like anybody else who gets up in the morning and goes to the office.
I've been able to see him in the studio. When he works, he likes to have music on.
You know, I come to the studio, I turn on some music.
And that music, it sparks something in his brain.
And, you know, just try to get into the zone. Chuck Close, who's one of my favorite artists, has this quote that I'm gonna butcher completely. basically says that there's no such thing as an artist being inspired and then painting. You have to work. You just work, and then you'll find that inspiration in the working. I make it a goal, it's a part of my process to constantly be making, to constantly be doing, to constantly be painting or drawing, sketching, doing something, and that's where the ideas actually come from. Rise Above is the piece that was created for the King Memorial MARTA station. And it was inspired by a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. I wanted to do something that would speak to the people who lived here and not necessarily be a reflection of another image of an icon. So what I did, instead of painting, Dr. King, was to take his words and apply it in a way that, anyone walking by could kind of see themselves reflected in the piece. And, it represents a figure who's jumping. You see his figure breaking the plane as if to suggest that his rise is infinite. Copying ads in magazines. That's how I taught myself how to do design, because I never took any design classes. And one day, as I was at a bookstore buying magazines, one of the subscription cards fell out. And I remember picking it up, and there was somebody on the cover of this magazine. I'd never heard of them before, and I was just like, when you see somebody on the cover of a magazine, you think it must be somebody important on the cover of a magazine. I should be on the cover of a magazine. So I made up a magazine called Contemporaneo. I put myself on the cover. I mocked up some back issues, and I made up a fictitious subscription card that said if you fill it in and mail it back, you'll get a free issue of the magazine with Fahamu on the cover. And then I went back to the bookstores and I stuffed these into magazines all along the newsstand. So I must have put out 1,000 of them or something, but they came back by the dozens, and from Australia and all kind of places. People were filling out these cards. And I was looking at it and I was like, man, this image is cool. I should paint this. And it was like a light bulb went off. This is it. This is what I've been, chasing. And so from that point on, I set out to paint myself on the cover of every art magazine ever made.